Hello, I'm Tammy Simmons. I'm your host. Thanks for tuning in to ManchTalk, where we like to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly things that go in and around in Manchester. Carla Gericke is joining me again today, which I love because Carla and I have determined that we really don't have to prepare for the show when we're on together because we both have so much going on in our heads that we can just talk for the 30 minutes and it ends up being pretty good. Today is Thursday, which is unusual for us to be taping on Thursday because we tape on Tuesdays, but I had to rearrange. Thank you to the folks here at Manchester Public Television for accommodating me, but I went up to Concord on Tuesday because there was a vote on the repeal of the education tax credit, which is a issue that's near and dear to my heart, which I kind of think is funny because I don't have any kids.
Right.
But education to me is a very important issue because it does impact so many things in our community. That bill, which would have repealed the scholarships for 413 kids in New Hampshire, which is insane.
Including 41.
41 or 45, nobody really could confirm the exact number. In Manchester. I had the opportunity to meet a kid from West Manchester, of all places, who had been in the public schools and had been bullied, had been in a charter school. His mom moved him over to a charter school, was bullied again, and now she was homeschooling him. Weirdest takeaway, I made sure I was introducing this kid Andy to all the state reps from Manchester, just so they could put a story with what this bill was actually going to do. I had this truly bizarre conversation with Representative Jeff Goley from Ward 1. He thought he was going to vote to repeal it because he thought all these schools needed to follow the same admission rules as public schools. And I said, I'm not following. What are you talking about? He goes, well, religious schools are allowed to discriminate and not have, if you don't meet their criteria. And I said, right, but we have religious freedom in our country. You don't want to start dictating that religious schools can't. And he said, well, no, but they should have to follow the same rules. And I said, but
that doesn't.
He goes, they're taking public money. I said, oh, but that's the difference. They're not taking public money. This is private money. It never goes into the hands of the state. That's where the difference is. And I said, and we have a constitution that says we cherish education, and I think that means all education. I don't think it means only this flavor.
Right, government-run education.
It doesn't say public school buildings only. And I said, so I think saying that you were going to discriminate against religious schools would be found to be unconstitutional. I said, and he said, but it wouldn't be unconstitutional to repeal the tax credits. And I was at a loss for how to respond to that because how do you respond with that's not how that works.
Right, and I think there is a little misunderstanding there. I was surprised that they tabled it, and I'm not quite sure what that means.
Very curious why they tabled it.
If they tabled it because they think it's not going to pass, and so they don't just want to go there, or if there is going to be some kind of shenanigans.
Right. I'm guessing it's one or the other. I'm guessing the Democrats either whipped their votes and found out that they did not have enough votes to pass.
Right.
In which case, if they took a vote, maybe it was even going to be close.
Right.
If they took a vote, that would put all of their representatives on record as infringing on these children.
And really, this is just, it's basic meanness.
Yep.
This is just party politics.
Well,
and I think that, the decent reps, we can disagree about stuff, and we can disagree about policy.
This is one
this is one where really, I don't think with a straight face, if you're like a decent human being who thinks that, understands that children do learn differently.
Right. That's what I don't understand.
It's not, hurting the taxpayer. Nope. It's making kids happy. So, why would we repeal this? It's wrong.
I think they either didn't have the votes, or, like you said, I have concerns. I keep telling people, nothing's over till it's over, that they're going to try to maybe tack it onto the budget bill and make it a little less painful to have to vote for it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Or a little less accountable because people could say, well, I voted for the bill because it had all these other things. Yeah. But I was glad to see it tabled.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. We all know that Governor Sununu is going to have a lot of red pen action coming up.
Apparently, he has like 20,000 red pens.
I suppose people are just mailing.
They are. They said they're just shipping them. People are just mailing him all these red pens, which I think is kind of fun. So also in Concord, so that was Tuesday. So now it's Thursday, the 21st, I guess, second day of spring. Yay. I noticed we both have. I know we both have coats on, but I didn't have to wear 3 coats over it.
And I have short sleeves, so it's like we're
making
getting
steps
there.
Yesterday, I didn't really follow the session day yesterday on Wednesday. You were up there, I think, weren't you in the morning?
No, I didn't go up, but I mean, I think, certainly people on Tuesday, there was just a lot of like, oh my goodness, we banned plastic straws, we banned plastic bags. It sounded like a really good day for fascists in California.
Yeah.
It did not sound like New Hampshire at all.
Maybe next week or another week. I'm very curious. It'll be, we know that the governor's going to veto both the straw ban and the plastic bag restrictions. I was reading the amendment on the bag one, and it was just so convoluted. And it started out as like nobody can have bags, pretty much, unless they were for your prescriptions. Unless you were on WIC or I was like, what? If you get EBT or SNAP benefits, then you could get bags. The store has to sell them to you, but they keep the money. But now if it's 6 inches or smaller and doesn't have a handle, that's okay. And I'm who came up with this
lunacy? Like, who wants to, can we just talk about that? Who wants to live in a world where we are down to that level
and if I break my grocery bag and ask for another one, is somebody breaking a law?
And it's just, but we don't want, It was funny, I read this morning, Senator Feltus, it's his 40th birthday, and he's throwing some party, and there was a quote from him in the paper where he talked about our shared values. And I thought, that's a really interesting term, because what are those shared values?
I don't know if I share many values.
And I feel like that's really something that we as Granite Staters should grapple with.
Right.
Because I don't think we all share the same values.
No.
And that's the argument for limited government.
Right.
The fact that, hey, we don't actually all agree about stuff. Yep. So why don't we make government as limited as possible? Yep. And then we all advocate within the market, within just our communities, for the things we want. So if you hate plastic bags and you hate plastic straws, first of all, don't use them yourself.
Right.
Second of all, try and convince your friends and family
not to use
them.
Noticed I've changed my habit. Awareness is a fine thing.
Right.
I go and get iced coffee pretty much every day, right? So every day I get a straw. If I'm home, when I'm done with that cup, it's bad enough that I'm using the plastic cup. Apparently we're okay with plastic cups, just not plastic straws. But now I notice...
Which is part of the insanity,
it's
right?
It's like, so some plastic's okay, but not all plastic.
And let's just circle back to the actual where this plastic straw thing comes from. So it comes from, and this is verifiable, you can go look it up. There was like a 11-year-old or 10-year-old kid who did a book report in California about like plastic straws, made the correlation between that and pollution in the ocean, came up with a totally bogus number. Like this entire thing is not based on anything that rationally is something in the bigger scheme of things that we should be concerned about. This is not one of those things.
No, I like for myself. Now I notice instead of throwing the straw away and getting a new one, okay, so I rinse it out and set it on the dish drain. Okay, but see, I've changed my usage.
Right.
So in a year, instead of using 400 plastic straws from Cumberland Farms, I probably only use 200.
Right. And I actually, when I was back home in South Africa, I bought, you get these permanent straws now. So I got a couple of those. I haven't used them yet. It's not warm enough for me for iced tea season. But, we'll get there. And, and it's like, look, I get it. People are concerned about the environment.
But what about the concern on the flip side? Aren't these people the same people who are concerned about the environment? What about cleanliness? I mean, I hadn't really considered it so much, but, you go into I've worked in restaurants. They're relatively clean. The tables aren't always clean. People touch stuff. So do you really want to go into a random place and take a cup and put it to your mouth?
Well, both that and also the paper straw. I mean, those things don't work.
It's just weird. And this is the priorities. These seem to be these are things that they actually,
someone asked me the other day, they were like, why is all this crazy stuff happening? And my takeaway is, first of all, I think like average Granite Stater Democrats
are not the same as
are kind of looking at this a little bit askew as well, and askance, and sort of going, huh? Like, is this?
That's not really what I was.
A lot of 2018 was a reaction to national politics.
I agree.
So, So I don't think, the average Granite Stater Democrat
is like,
the people I talk to are like, Carla, we don't want to take your guns, and we also don't understand what all this weird stuff is. So this is definitely out-of-state interests who are coming, who have basically figured out, in my opinion, how to replicate really bad socialist programs across...
State to state.
Yes, across the states, right? And so we just happen to be a very strong target right now. So I genuinely think, there'll be pushback. I hope Chris vetoes all of this stuff.
He seemed to imply that was the plan,
and that we can just get back to business,
right?
Let's get priorities.
Well, that's like another bill that I did print out for my very minimal preparation for the show anymore was a bill that passed yesterday, House Bill 397. And I'm seeing a lot of this on social media, and it was in the paper, so it did pique interest of people, and it piqued my interest. It says it would allow predominantly those without a Social Security card, which everybody in the United States, you've had a Social Security card since you were 18, if not now. I think babies get them. So the only people who don't have Social Security cards in this country are probably people who are here, have stayed beyond their permission to be here, or have just arrived here in some way. The debate over if our immigration policies are good or bad, or walls or what, any of that. But if you're here and you do not have a Social Security card or a Social Security number, it's going to be really hard for you to get a driver's license because you can't prove that you actually belong here. So this bill would allow people without Social Security cards, and the presumption is that would be undocumented peoples, to get a driver's license in New Hampshire. And on the surface, you might be like, so what? I just have an ID. Except for you can use that same ID to register and vote.
You can?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so think about it.
I didn't know that, because I do know people who actually for conscientious reason, who just are like, I don't, like the Social Security number. I think it's a slave number, whatever. I know those people, and so I could see them being like, yeah, this is great. I don't have. But to those
same people probably
number.
aren't. A lot of those people also aren't looking to get a driver's license.
You know what I mean?
Because they probably don't think they need to have a driver's license either.
Yep.
So. A lot of discussion about this could very well lead to a lot of people who maybe shouldn't be voting, because you shouldn't be voting if you're not a United States citizen. That's just the way it works, folks. Get over it.
Yeah, and that's how
a common
every
sense.
country's
I think that's a shared
works.
value, that if you are not a citizen of this country, you can't vote here.
And that's how it works in every country.
Right. So
that's just like a basic. I think we.
So
can
then
agree
I got to thinking about
law.
this bill, and I'm like, so what's the call for this? Like, you
Who
change.
sponsored it? Do you know?
Representative Sykes from Grafton, Representative Manjaputi from Hillsborough. I think she's from Nashua. Representative King, Representative Harriet Garthright,
and that one passed, right?
This passed, and Senator Waters. So I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, so the real reason bills should be put in is because there should be a need for them. We don't need to just make laws because we have nothing better to do.
Could someone make a note of that?
If the folks who do not have Social Security numbers because they're conscientious objectors were saying to the representatives, you need to find a way for me to be able to get a driver's license without having to get a Social Security number. That might be a New Hampshire need. Which group of people living in New Hampshire without Social Security numbers are not able to obtain driver's license? Which also made me suspicious, because I recently renewed my driver's license and I opted not to get a real ID because I'm not doing it.
Right.
So, and I also, Dan and I are very specific. We do not allow them to keep our Social Security numbers or our pictures on file. And very clearly, the woman at the counter said, if you lose your driver's license because of these new requirements, you're going to have to start from scratch, and you're going to have to bring in original birth certificate and original all this. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take my chances, right? And I was talking to people in line.
And of course, they're making it that hard because the federal government wants to force you to be on the list database.
So different people in line, because you're there for quite a while. So I talked to people. Were there like for their second time because some older people, they don't have a birth certificate from the county or the city.
Right.
They have the birth certificate from the Catholic Church or something.
Or like in my case, I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen, so like I have a copy of a birth certificate from South Africa.
And so that's not going to fly, right? So there's all these criteria for people that are legitimate citizens in this country who have, and we're going to make it so it's easier for people who don't. It just seems like, what is the call for this? And that made me think, well, this is part of this bigger agenda, this bigger campaign. The same thing about banning plastic straws. It isn't people in New Hampshire who are like, ban the straws.
Right.
It's some outside group. And I personally take offense to it because so many of those same people are constantly trying to say that when New Hampshire people are trying to do things, we're being influenced by an outside group, because the Koch brothers pay for my house, apparently. I think they pay my mortgage. I know. Well, somebody said that to me at the State House, that the education tax credit, well, this was just, they don't want anything to do with this Betsy DeVos thing. And the woman talking to her goes, our tax credits existed before Betsy DeVos was on the...
Right.
And the woman hesitated. She goes, well, then it must be the Koch brothers. And I thought, it's just got to be something nefarious to you.
Well, the thing is also, they play a better propaganda game.
They are much better at it.
So there's this sense, if someone's not being, not thinking for themselves, and it's like there are the 6 insults that I hear, and the Koch brothers.
Koch brothers, you're a free stater, but you're from out of state.
Getting back to that sort of idea of the shared values, and this was my point, is the differences between their agendas, and I would even say, if you want to call what I'm doing an agenda, fine, we can quibble about that.
What they might consider an agenda.
But here's the difference. This group over here is saying, I'm going to make everyone do what I want.
Right.
And I am saying, stop making people do things they don't want to do. Right. And there is a vast difference with that. Right. So the one is actually a shared value of liberty and emancipation and freedom to be the person you want to be. But here, it's like, I am going to make all of you be like me. And I'm like, that's an agenda.
Right.
This is freedom.
That's right. Well, and I know this came up when I'm a proponent of allowing anybody who wants to get married, any adult, any two willing adults to get married. I don't care if you're 2 guys, 2 girls, a guy and a girl. I don't care. It doesn't impact my life. I shouldn't be making these decisions for you. Whatever works for you. And I get a lot of pushback as a Republican on that, and I'm totally losing my train of thought. But people say, I always say, but you can't make people. You can't force people into a funnel. You can't legislate.
Well, I had an interesting conversation. There was a great debate moderated by former House Speaker Bill O'Brien on Monday night up at the Nacky Lobe. And it was about marijuana, cannabis prohibition, the costs and benefits, of both approaches. So there were 3 panelists, pro and against, right? And it was just, I would say, one of the great things is I would say, it was a room predominantly filled with Republicans, of which the majority were actually pro-legalization, right? I think people have come around to
as people have gotten information and been a little more educated on the subject, I agree.
So there, I did speak to one of the prohibitionists afterwards, because I thought, maybe I can make some inroads. And, let's always have a conversation. That's part of what I stand for, right? Like, we can talk about these ideas. We don't just have to. Because when you're not forcing people to do things, I have to persuade you to come around to using less straws or whatever it is that's your jam, right? Persuade me and I'll do it. If it's a good idea, you'll bring me around. So this guy, I actually asked him, I said, and I'm obviously in the pro camp. And I said to him, look, I'm a successful lawyer. I've practiced on 2 continents. Yep. I have a master's degree in something entirely unrelated. Like, I'm good on paper. I'm a successful person. Right. What gives you the right to tell me what I can do with my body? And he was flummoxed. And he looked at me and I said, do you think you own me? And he said, yes.
See,
and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I shook his hand and I said, I'm sorry, sir.
I can't agree.
I can't actually have a conversation with you.
Because it's like my conversation with Jeff Goley. At that point, I was just like I can't work with this.
Right.
I can't even.
Right. And, and it's also, so we have, these people over here, but we have these people that are crazy.
I mean, I've had the same thing.
Oh,
that's right. On the marriage issue, I know what it was. My point was, people say, well, I don't want my Catholic Church to have to marry two same-sex people. And I said, well, you're Catholic. And I would fight to defend the right of your church to never have to marry two people that don't fall into the criteria of your church's doctrine.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
You see, but that's the interesting thing, in that based on that conversation with Mr. Pearson, it was the same sort of thing. Like, they have this sense. I mean, there was also this sense of, if we legalize pot, everybody's going to smoke the pot all the time.
And I'm like, I'm not going to smoke. Okay, I don't care.
It's like, I don't drink alcohol. It's like you make personal choices in your life. So this whole idea of if something is, and in fact, Representative Herschel Nunes, who's a new rep up at the State House, when they were doing they wanted to start the small business called the Fermentory that was going to do all fermented goods in New Hampshire. So, and fermented food is really good for you. So like kombuchas and kimchi's and like all this stuff, but like with a New Hampshire flair and flavors and stuff, right? And so when they were going through the permitting process, one of the things that came up, they were told by the state that because kombucha, i.e. like a fermented cool drink, is not licensed or regulated in New Hampshire, it is illegal.
So it can't exist unless there's some regulation.
So we're at the stage where people actually think unless the government sanctions something,
and that's just
then it's legal, and then you're allowed to, as opposed to the government is supposed to be constrained, and we could do whatever we want
as long as it doesn't cross that.
So it's like, no, kombucha is not illegal because it's not licensed. Like we're in such a dark time,
and people, and quite honestly, the majority of people just don't really think it through. And I've been trying to have conversations in a Facebook chat group for Ward 10. And our reps, a couple of the reps, have taken offense to it. You can tell. And I know when I was a rep, if I vote a certain way, I have to own that vote.
Right.
And if I can't explain to somebody who asks me why I voted a certain way, I probably shouldn't be representing people.
Right.
It's fine to not vote the way I want you to vote, but don't get upset with me if I say, hey, did you know they voted this way? But we try to have
to stand by your record. I mean, that was actually one of the bigger challenges, I think, with my race. Like, it's very easy if you're a people pleaser to try and be like,
just everything to everyone.
I can, everything to everyone. And eventually I was like, no, I just got to be who I am. And people could say, I'm going to take you, or no, I'm not going to take you.
I agree.
But I'm not going to pretend to be someone or say something, and people can either like it. And I like to think people should embrace people like us, because genuinely, I'm just trying to make your life better and put more money in your pocket.
Over the years, when I've volunteered for big campaigns, for U.S. Senate campaigns and stuff, there's been people I've worked with who have gotten a lot of votes from Democrats in New Hampshire. Because, and they'll say, well, I might not agree with you, but at least I know who you are, and I know where you're going to come, where you're coming from. So,
I mean, John Burt in Goffstown, which is part of my district, he says, I have a core group of Democrats who vote for me for that exact reason.
Because they know what they're getting.
I don't always agree with you, but I know how you're going to vote.
That's right. And you're honest about it, and you own it.
Right.
So I don't, I'm with you. I've just gotten to the point where I'm like, don't get me wrong, I don't try to be antagonistic with people when I'm talking to them about legislation or anything, but I'm, if you're on one side of an issue and I'm on the other side of the issue, unless you can give me some credible facts, I've changed my views over the years. I used to be anti-pot because I was in that mindset of everybody else who was anti-pot. And the more I looked at the data, the more I was like, what the heck? This is even... it has zero impact on my life whatsoever, but I can just look at it and say, if whatever you want, it doesn't impact me. It's a plant.
Right.
It's a plant. The government has somehow determined that some plant is illegal. Now, if you want to say somebody can't sell that plant, okay, maybe. But that doesn't mean you can't plant it in your backyard. Are we going to legislate basil? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, plant it in your backyard and then literally have like death squads show up at your house and kill your dog. And, you know, and then they're like, oh, sorry, it was the wrong house. Or, oh, sorry, it wasn't pot. It was a tomato plant. Or, sorry, whatever. And for every one of the things I just said, there are hundreds of examples of that literal thing happening. Yes. And so at some stage you have to weigh the harm versus the benefit. And thank God people are really starting to do
I found
that.
there was a discussion on Facebook. I don't even remember what the issue was. I think it was a death penalty discussion. And I was very surprised that a Republican colleague of mine that I know from the area, who is very Republican, you know, very conservative, very socially conservative, very picture of a Republican, and people were saying, well, they supported the death penalty because, you know, apparently if we get rid of the death penalty, everybody's just going to murder everybody or something. I don't know. But even he said, I do not have faith in the justice system. I see too many things that don't work right. I mean, we both printed out the thing about the oversight of the New Hampshire police, and there's rules in place and they're supposed to happen and they just don't. So you've got them self-policing themselves, which isn't
not only self-policing themselves, they're self-policing themselves in
quietly,
secret.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, people, I think rational thinking people.
But that's once again,
it doesn't make you. I don't have to be anti-cop to be suspicious when I'm reading that police are supposed to. The police chiefs are supposed to report when an officer is suspended or arrested or all these exerted undue force, and they're supposed to report them up the chain.
You know, like when Chief Willard drove into the post box and cost $10,000 in damage, and that only came out a year later. That kind of stuff where you're just like, you know, I want to trust you, but I
want to be skeptical.
Right.
I want to have a healthy dose of skepticism in most things in my life. I generally don't trust the government.
Yeah.
Because it's just made too many mistakes too many times.
Well, and I think the fortunate thing, and that's possibly why the battle is sort of heating up, right? 10 years ago, I would not have predicted we would at any stage nationally be in a debate between socialism and capitalism. I mean, there's a version of capitalism. Crony capitalism, you know, and we can talk about that, is because of the internet. And the fact that they don't control, they being the government, does not control the narrative anymore. Facts are getting out there. They can lie about stuff, but, you know, and this is partly, and I'm pro-police accountability, but maybe like 12 years ago, I signed up for a newsletter, and I remember, I mean, it was literally like a email newsletter that you had to scroll, you know, and it came in on Fridays. And I had signed up, and the first time I started reading it, you know, it came in, and like on the screen was like this much, and I was like, wow. And I was like clicking through and I was like, that's shocking. And like just those. And then I started scrolling and it was like pages long of these links. And I was like, this is crazy. I didn't know this is what's going on. Yep. And that sort of realization is part of why, you know, it's a core issue for me. And there's this solution to it, and it is sunshine.
Right.
It is
the more we know, the more we'll know.
The more transparent we can be. You know, I do think there are police officers who unjustly end up on things.
That's right.
You know, I'm sure if the Lori's list comes out, we can, but the point is, let it come out so we can look at it and we can say, you know what, you're not a problem. Nope. Or, gee, that's horrible, we should make sure you're off the list. But if we are giving all of this responsibility to them to investigate crimes, but they can't investigate themselves, then I have, frankly, very little trust in
the system.
The system.
I agree. Believe it or not, we are out of time
No
again.
way.
So quickly before I leave, I do want to mention, if you're watching this and the weekend's not over, this weekend is the Made in New Hampshire Expo at the Doubletree downtown, which used to be the Radisson, which used to be the Holiday Inn. I think it's like $9 for adults. It's a great little thing because you get to meet all sorts of New Hampshire craftspeople. So if you need to check something out, you know, go down there. If you haven't been to the Doubletree since they've renovated it, it's a little different than it used to be. JD's Tavern's not there, but we'll see how that all plays out.
That bar in the area.
That bar in the lobby is really kind of cool, though. So anyways, that's all I've got. I'm hoping that Carla will join me more frequently because this makes my job here much easier. But if you have any questions, you can email me at ManchTalk@gmail.com. If you have any questions for Carla, you could email me and I'll forward them on to her. If you want to hear a specific topic talked about, I'd love to be challenged to have to deal with the topic I'm not used to. That's all I have for today. Enjoy the spring weather and stay safe, and we'll see you next week.